Yeah, I think not a bad idea if we can, and then.
Then I would, yeah, the only reason you need the microphone for Zoom to hear.
Okay,
So-
can I use one of these?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They all work. Thank you. Thanks, Aaron.
Doing what? Yeah.
Check, check.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not really 40-ish. No. It's just not nowhere.
Well, hopefully you better soon.
Yeah. She's old too,
Yeah.
so. Those things happen in life, for sure, right? Mine, so mine.
See, Aaron, I think I screwed it up already.
From the south. And, I wanted to, my dad was very early. So I just went there. Yeah. So. But it was. That's hard too. I did that for a while. It's tiring all the time, but after she passed away, I was so grateful for every second that I was after. Yeah, absolutely. She got. Yes.
You can say yes.
No, it's for you.
Oh,
What are you?
is it saved for anyone?
Oh, you.
Okay.
Okay, so
So I missed the first two because I was,
you were traveling, so you didn't know you're teaching a class today?
oh, okay, so I hear people talk about the babysitter clause. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm doing it right. Do you always put in 4.5 in the beginning or whatever?
Yeah.
Whatever you charge, yeah, and I think we're gonna talk about that. I'll hit,
But you do that always and then do an addendum saying if they.
I do, yes.
Okay, that's
Yep.
what I should say percentage, but just in case. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make
No,
sure,
we
'cause
can,
that's what
within the
keeps
brokerage,
hearing.
we can talk about percentages because everybody charges a little bit different and commissions are not fixed.
Right.
So, yeah. So, yeah. I'm gonna touch on that. I'm gonna spend a little more time on the buyer side and, asking for brokerage fees in the offer, outside of the offer, but we'll hit on that a little bit too. And I can bring that to speed on it. Cool.
Oh, thanks. A little bit nervous, just I want to make sure I do everything right. So I just want to, anyway, thank you.
Sarah, like Larry, S-A-R-I, right? S-A-R-I. Your family birthday is a week before Christmas. I'm sorry to remember it.
I'm serious.
So now you'll have to remember my birthday.
Exactly.
Oh, with a birthday a week before Christmas.
A little bit busy and chaotic, right?
A little bit, yeah.
You guys want to get started? Okay. So we might have other people join us. How's everybody feeling about stuff?
A little hesitant, 'cause I missed the first two classes.
That's okay. That's all right. We're gonna just keep talking. We're gonna hit, for those that are on Zoom. We're gonna keep talking about the same stuff, right? Because it's new. And there's, nuances. A lot of people have different interpretations on how they look at these forms, especially when it comes to buyer broker commissions and where do we ask for it. So today's just gonna kind of be free for all. What I want to do, you guys see that okay? Does it look familiar? The new buyer broker agreement? Okay, has it really changed a whole lot? It hasn't really, has it? We've got now more of an end date versus an expiration date. In section 1.2, they've given us the ability to list, particular counties, particular properties, and things like that. So because our conversation needs to be a little more in depth with the buyer on this, has the buyer always been ultimately responsible for paying the buyer broker fee? Yes, they have. What has changed? There's no more guarantee through the MLS, right? Pretty elementary. So with this, we may run into some situations where you're working with a buyer that doesn't really want to commit, or the situation where now a buyer calls, they know you, they get referred to you, you've never met them before or anything, and they call and they want to go see a house, right? What do we have to do first? You have to have an agreement, buyer agreement. Now, if you're following all the social media and other brokerages, et cetera, we're following, and we always have here at this brokerage, and it could always change, but for now, we use the UAR approved forms. Okay, they're written by attorneys, they're approved to give us a certain element of protection. Our UAR and the board have not given us what we call showing agreement. Some type of agreement that doesn't establish agency, but it sets the parameters of the settlement, which really is you have to have a specific fee, your terms of service, and the specific verbiage, right? I'm not a big fan of those. I think we just need to have more in-depth conversations with our buyers before we just start run out and go show houses. So this new buyer broker has made it a little easier for us, maybe because we as agents too, we kind of are interviewing that prospective buyer too, right? Maybe we find out that it's just not going to be a right fit to work together. So if we sign a 6-month buyer broker form, we have some fiduciary duties, right? With this, it allows us to say, okay, hey, let's go look at these 3 properties. We can talk, build a little bit of rapport. But before we do that, we need to go through this buyer broker, and we'll just do it for those 3 particular properties, or we could do any properties. We could do it for a day. Where you sign it, you're going to go look tomorrow. It expires at midnight tomorrow. We have no more agency agreement. We have no more fiduciary duties to them, and they don't have a commitment to us. So we do have those options. I like that. Okay, rather than having to jump into a 4-month or 6-month contract. It also does talk about the buyer does have a representation agreement. Can a buyer sign 2 exclusive buyer broker agreements? Yeah, they can. Can sign one with you, and for instance, I'm gonna sign one for Shelley in Salt Lake County. I'm gonna sign one with Terry in Davis County. And Dixie is going to cover, even maybe Cache County. Can they do that? Yeah, they can. So we got to ask some questions when we meet. Have you signed anything, buyer, right? So that's why they put it on here. Do you have a representation agreement with another brokerage for the following property? So if I'm going to go show them those particular properties, I want them to let me know if they have a buyer broker signed with another brokerage, right? So yeah, can you see it's going to maybe get a little muddy? Okay. So, and then the brokerage fee, again, that same as it was, satisfaction of brokerage fee by a third party. Can you still get paid by a listing broker? Can you still get paid by a seller? Yeah, you can. Can your buyer pay the fee? Yes, they can. Kind of always been that way. And then the rest of the document, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. There's very minor changes here and there, just some wording, but for the most part, it's just giving us more flexibility because now we have to have a signed agreement before we go show houses. If you're going to go do a virtual tour over Facebook or something like that, Facebook, Messenger, whatever, or FaceTime, go through your house, do you need to have a buyer broker signed? Yeah, Dixie's right. So you're not in you do. That's what they consider working with a buyer. If you're hosting an open house, it's your own listing and you're hosting an open house. Do you need to have any agreement for those buyers that come in? If you're hosting an open house for me, do you need to have? No, you don't. Okay. So pretty elementary stuff, right? Going to move to yes, yes, and just for anybody that's on Zoom, et cetera, on that is the policy. You're welcome to. You can show houses for people within the brokerage. You can hold open houses for other agents in the brokerage. We cannot do it for other agents outside. If your friend at Coldwell Banker, even though they've got a buyer broker with a buyer, I just wouldn't open yourself up to that liability. Okay, there is some caveats that I don't really get into, again, we're not showing the home, they're already under contract. Can I open a door? Yeah, I think you're fine with that. Like if my friend at Coldwell, my friend Jeff, called and said, listen, I'm out of town. The buyer needs to get access to the property to measure for carpet or something like that. Could you go open a form? Yeah, I'm okay with that. They're already under contract. I'm not using them as a client. I'm helping somebody out. I think we're fine there, right? So that's rare, but it does come up. Let's see. Now, What other forms do we want to talk about? Let's talk about best practices on brokerage fees. Have you guys had a chance to review the new broker or the new REPSI? What do you see in section 4.3? We still have the escrow fees, deposit, HOA entity, change of ownership fees, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we have this new section, 4.3E, real estate brokerage compensation. If you've read through that, does that seem familiar to anybody? I'm going to test my skills here on using Windows, but I think I can do this. Oh, so no, it's the wrong one. Bad. I don't know where the back buttons are here. I've got them moved. What I'm looking for is the addendum. Here it is. No. Brokerage payment addendum. Here, we've had this document for quite some time, right? Okay, so if you were out 2 years ago showing a house and the seller was offering 1% buyer broker fee on it, and your fee to your buyer that they were getting charged was 2.5%, and you were only getting 1% from the listing broker, great. That's happy to take what you can get from the listing broker, but you wanted to ask the seller for additional compensation. Are you all familiar? Did anybody ever use this seller's payment? Okay. Many people did. Okay. And what it said in here is let's run this scenario. I have a buyer broker sign with a buyer, and it just happens to be at 3%. This was 2 years ago. Okay. So bear with me. I looked on the MLS, and that particular listing brokerage was only offering 1% compensation. And it says, okay, that's great, but I don't talk with my buyer. My buyer, what do you want to do to get your fee offset? Well, let's ask the seller. We can't interfere with the listing broker, right? We could never do that. Let's ask the seller to pay that additional 2%. This is how we did it in this form. Now, if my buyer broker was 3, I'm not putting 3 in here. Why? Because you get 4 because of this verbiage. The escrow, blah, blah, this payment, whatever's put in here, dollar amount or percentage shall be made in addition to any other compensation agreed to by the seller's brokerage and the buyer brokerage. Prior to us losing the BBC on the MLS, we had to take that into consideration. I saw a lot of mistakes being made where agents were putting their full fee that they wanted in here, and they didn't realize that's in addition to, and listing agents sometimes didn't understand it. There was some major problems with it, but if we study this, we know this. It's just in addition to. So look at this verbiage is basically the same as what they now have. They've just moved that addendum. It doesn't make the addendum obsolete. There could be some times when you'll use it, but now they've put it in the REPSI. So seller's compensation contribution to buyer's brokerage. Seller and buyer agree that seller shall contribute either a percentage or a dollar amount to buyer's brokerage. If you leave it blank, it's 0. Okay, they're already just saying that. If you skim through it, you don't put anything in there, or it's 0, there's no compensation. This payment shall be made in addition to any other compensation agreed to by the seller's brokerage to buyer's brokerage. Okay, get clear on that? So it's basically the same as that addendum. They're just putting it in here now. So let's take the scenario. And I'm going to pick on Terry. Terry is the listing agent of a home that my buyer wants to see. I call Terry. Hey, Terry, Shirley, I'm just curious, are you offering any broker-to-broker compensation? And Terry says, well, yes, I do have permission from my seller, and we are offering 2%. I say, terrific. I'll take what I can get, right? That would be great. My responsibility as the buyer's agent would be to, should have pulled it up. Anybody got an idea of what form I'm going to use? Could I do that? I don't know, do you? I'm picking on Shelley because she was on vacation. Okay. So let's come back to that scenario where Terry did that and said, Terry, yes, we are offering 2%. I got a couple choices and I'm probably going to defer to my buyer, right? Let's talk to our principal about this. In this case, I represent the buyer. You say, I've checked with them on it. We're going to go see the house. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I have this real estate brokerage compensation agreement. Just guys, I'm just going to start calling this the escrow. Remember our old escrow? If you wanted to credit some of your commission or something, it was between the brokerages and signed, gave title companies author. That doesn't exist anymore. This is it. Okay, this is the new escrow. I wish they would have just called it brokerage escrow or something like that. Maybe they will change it. But I'm going to fill this out because I know Terry's brokerage. I know my brokerage. I know the buyer. I can look up or just put owner of record on this for that particular property, Terry's listing. Put a time frame on it, 40 days, 60 days, whatever you want. And then if Terry told me she's offering 2%, I'm going to put 2 in here. Maybe not. Anyway, provisions of buyer's broker agreement, buyer, and I'm acknowledging before we all sign this, I have a written buyer broker, which we have to have before we go show the property, that obligates the buyer to compensate buyer's brokerage. Obligation may be satisfied by a third party. We know about that. Buyer's brokerage may not accept compensation from any source that is greater than buyer's obligation under the buyer broker agreement, right? Have you been hearing that over and over? Question.
So my commission has suddenly become a negotiation between the buyer and the seller, right?
Yeah, it can.
And so instead of putting like, for example, the 3% in that spot, if I put 3.5, I tell my buyer, I'm only gonna charge you 3, I'm just gonna use that 2.5 as a negotiation tool. So I could ask for more here, and then they'll say, no, I'm only giving you 3%, what do you ask for 3.5? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Everything's negotiable, right? I'm going to come back to your scenario because we're going to spend a little bit more time with what we're putting on the buyer broker, but I want to bring you back to this document. So Terry told me that she's offering 3. I have an oral agreement. As the buyer's agent, if I want to capitalize on that, it behooves me to fill this document out and sign it. Do I need to have my buyer sign it right away? No, not a bad idea. The buyer and seller only sign this. If Terry's listing agreement in section 2.2, she's had that communication with her seller. The seller has authorized her to advertise or otherwise enter into a compensation agreement with another agent for up to 2%. She is fine to sign that. As a buyer's agent, I'm going to sign this, and I may or may not zip it to my buyer, but I'm going to send it over to Terry and say, Terry, would you please sign this? I'm going to go show the property. Maybe I've already shown the property. Could be that way too. And I'm going to ask to get this in writing. Once it is signed by Terry and myself, becomes a binding contract, pretty much exactly the way it was with the MLS. Just because that BBC was printed on there, that was protection for the brokerage to get paid. That no longer exists. This document is now just a written form of that. Is how I look at it. So we have that. Hang on just one second. So we have that agreement to where I have that signed before I send Terry an offer. Why would I want it before? What happens if I send it with the offer and they just sign they sign the REPC, but they don't sign it? Okay, I don't have. So I want that written agreement on there. We're all on the same page. The buyer and seller will get copies of it. They understand it. Everybody's authorized it. So again, my buyer broker was say 3%. I got 2 from Terry. You want to really complicate it? Could I ask in the offer for the seller to pay the additional 1%? Well, now you can use the actual REPC. I would come in here. Again, not confusing, but these are the scenarios we got to think through. My buyer broker is signed at 3%. I now have an agreement signed broker to broker from Terry for 2%. Yes, I could discuss with my buyer what we're doing and explain it. Right? Say, buyer, I've got an agreement where I'll receive 2% of my fee that you won't have to pay. That still leaves 1%. Could you negotiate with your buyer at that point and say, hey, I'd be willing to do it for 2.5? Sure. But let's say you don't, and you say, in that case, then I'm going to put it in the offer here in section 4.3E. How much am I going to put in there? If I want the full 3%, I'm getting 2 from 2. I'm going to put 1, right? So if I put 1% in there, and then that shall be made in addition to any other compensation agreement, is this a compensation agreement, right? So you guys follow me on that? Hold on a second. Do you have to do that? No. So that is a situation where you're using a broker to broker compensation agreement. But if that's not enough to satisfy the obligation the buyer has to pay you, you can then put the additional and ask for it in the offer. I would recommend the Rep C versus the addendum. They get the same purpose, but let's try to, this is getting confusing to everybody, including myself. I'm like, what is going on? But do you guys, are you clear on that? Okay, now, okay.
If I have.
The scenario, yeah, great question. So that brokerage pay, I don't think it's going to get used a whole lot, but there are some scenarios where, let's say you have a buyer that is okay paying your commission. You have nothing with the listing agent. You write an offer and you don't ask for any compensation. The buyer's like, hey, I'll just pay you. That's fine. And then you get negotiating and the buyer's like, ah, man, I can go a little bit higher. I can put some more down on it, but it's going to leave me a short on commission. Let's negotiate it. Let's add that addendum in negotiations and do that. So I don't think it's going to get used a lot, but there will be times it'll be nice to have it. But for the most part, I see it being in here. I'm going to pop over to Sarah because I deferred to her a minute ago.
Already have the proper form signed.
Mhm.
Sellers offering upgrades.
Mhm.
So what do I need to expect this from each and every one?
Good, depends.
Or if I'm putting in an offer, will you send me, and I send it to them so they can sign it?
You could do it that way. The only caveat with that is you probably don't have the buyer's name. You probably don't, you may have the brokerage name on it. That's the thing with it. Like and my tune is going to change a little bit. Initially, what I've told my sellers I'm going to do is I take a copy, I go to the listing appointment. I explain to them the benefits of cooperative compensation. I explain to them that they don't have to offer it. I explain in detail with them as you're giving me authorization to offer up to 3%, guys. For my sellers, I'm just saying, plan on it. It's going to be 3. There's could be less. But if we really want to promote this out there, I'm going to offer it, and you're allowing me to go into a brokerage compensation agreement. And I'll even fill out the details on it and sign it and say, this is really what it's going to look like. Now, I don't have the buyer's info. I don't want somebody editing something that I've signed. I could zip you a copy of it so you feel good that it's there, but it's going to behoove the buyer's agent to fill that out. So in your case, where I'm the listing agent, you get a few people calling. Clint calls and says, I got some people interested. Are you offering compensation? Yes, I've got authorization to offer up to 3%. Clint, it's up to you if you want to do it in a compensation agreement or put it in the offer. I'll leave it up to you. I'm available right now, if you want to fill out the compensation agreement and it looks good and you've filled it out right, there's no hanky panky, you sign it, I'll sign it. He's getting paid that commission if the deal closes. You can have your sellers look at the document on this though. Best practice is to have them do it. Bad idea, but Clint and I can enter this agreement without having the buyer or seller. Buyer and seller's signatures below acknowledges that they have received a copy of this agreement. So great idea to have them, guys. Just you got to be transparent with it in more detailed conversation. So hopefully that helps. I'm going to bump over to Clint. Sorry.
Document really, and if it was in the Rep C, that guarantees it would.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's really one of two ways, or it can be a combination of both is what we're talking about today.
So this is pretty much taking place for the MLS saying whatever the compensation.
I'd look at it that way. Yeah, I do, Clint. Yeah. This is just more of a formal written agreement, broker to broker, that if we end up at a successful closing between this buyer and this seller, that in this case, your brokerage, you as the listing agent will pay my brokerage on it.
Buyer and seller, are they required to sign it, or do they just need a copy?
No, I would have them sign that they authorized it. Guys, be transparent with it. This is the different conversation, more likely than for our sellers. They're not, if I'm dealing with repeat customers, I just listed a property for them and they were looking at it and I'm explaining to them, like, this is dumb. Why? So of course, yeah, we're offering that out. We want the property sold. We want to incentivize people to come show the property in as many as possible, because they do understand that if they didn't offer anything, this was their words, if we don't offer anything, can buyers make the decision not to look at the house? Absolutely. Can agents? Better not. Better not. We don't here at KW South Valley. So yes, it's the new escrow instruction. That's your protection there. It's going to come in. Hang on one second, Lori. I want to talk about something on this. So back to that scenario where I had the agreement with Terry for 2%. Remember? My agreement with my buyer is 3%. Where things are going to get nutsed up is if we don't have a good understanding of this. I'm thinking, it's all right, okay, I got that over there, but then I'm going through this REPSI and I'm reading real estate brokerage, compensation, sellers, blah, blah, blah. Geez, I want to be careful and make sure I get paid. I better put 2 in here. I better put 2 in here. And we're already seeing it. So I've heard of nothing in this brokerage. But agents that just don't understand, have the understanding of this, they put 2 in here. It's going to create some problems. Why would it create a problem? I got 2 with Terry on our broker to broker. I put 2 in here thinking it's the same 2. No, if I put it in here, seller's paying 2, she's paying 2. I get 4. Did I really mean to do that? Probably not. Is the deal going to blow up? Yep, more than likely. So if I did that, then as the listing agent, if I'm Terry, I'm like, Mike, come on, we signed this over here. You were good with 2. Maybe my buyer broker is only 2%. If I put it in the offer and I'm not careful with that addition to listing agent Terry, better do a counter offer and clarify that. So that's where that muddiness and confusion.
I'm just wondering if you want to write a counter offer, could say they didn't agree to pay that commission. Like,
Mhm.
say they were offered 1% broker. You
Mhm.
put 2 in there, and you're like, no, I'm only paying 1 more, so they counter offer that.
Mhm.
And don't agree, you want to ask for more, so just do a regular addendum and ask for more.
Just counter offer.
Just-
No, I would stick with it in a REPSI. So let's take that scenario, pretend I don't even have an agreement on it. There's no broker to broker. Terry and I didn't. Terry just said, you know what, Mike, just put it in the offer. And I put 3% in here in 4.3. Terry is the listing agent, says, no, seller doesn't want to do that. Terry on the counter offer, just a regular addendum. She could probably put something to the effect in this as per section 4.3 EI, or 1, whatever seller's contribution to buyer's brokerage shall be 1.5%. You get the counter offer and talk to your buyer about it and understand what the ramifications are of what it may cost them to have to come in. And your buyer's like, well, we agreed upon all the terms and, but I don't really have the money to pay you. And they say, okay, well, we'll just counter back. We do another counter that says same thing, section 4.3 EI, seller's contribution by broker to be 2%. It's now negotiable. Okay. So guys, people are asking me what's best practice is. You got to have these discussions with your sellers and your buyers to make sure when it comes to paying, offering cooperative compensation, read these documents, understand them, have those conversations with your sellers on how that looks and how it may happen. I may enter into a compensation agreement, and that will typically happen before the offer. And obviously I'll let you know that, or if they don't, it will probably come in the offer. I had an experience with one of my listings just earlier this week. And the agent called me and said, and my seller has been very vocal for me wanting to promote that BAC. The agent called after he showed the property. Said, clients are interested. Are you offering anything? Yep, I've got authorization to offer up to 2.5% on this particular property. Terrific. He didn't ask for compensation agreement, told him we can handle it that way. He just put it in the offer. At the time, we didn't have the new Repsy, so he used the addendum. And it was just a line item thing. I told my sellers, net sheets are going to be very important. I said, this is same way we've done it for a long time. You're paying me X. Buyer's agent's asking rather you pay it directly rather than to send it through my brokerage. And it on the settlement statement, it's going to look the same. They're like, okay, that's kind of dumb, but why are you guys doing it that way? Class action attorneys. They're like, okay, yeah, whatever. What's the buyer offering us? Okay, let's counter the buyer and go back and forth. So in that case, there was no compensation agreement signed. It's in the offer.
You keep saying up to.
Yeah.
So your, as a listing agent, your sellers have agreed to pay 6%. So, but I'm just saying, this is a scenario, right?
It's fine.
So.
We can talk about commissions.
I mean, I know your sellers will too, but like, will you tell them if you do, like a full price offer, it's cheaper, or how are you having a conversation with the up to? I don't know.
Well, the up to really isn't, and that's the hard part with it, and I don't like the verbiage. The only reason why they do the up to has to do with the fact that a buyer agent brokerage cannot receive more money than what they have in their buyer broker agreement. And so the reason why I think that verbiage, I'm real curious, because again, I think we're going to have a new listing agreement within the next couple of weeks, revised to make it easier for us all. So keep our fingers crossed. If you allow me, you're the seller, I'm the listing broker, we talk about the benefits, the seller chooses to offer cooperative compensation of up to 3%, they're kind of, well, up to, because could it be less? Possibly. But if I enter into a compensation agreement with Todd that says he sends it over to me up to 3% on the compensation agreement, we're fine, right? That's in his buyer broker. But what if Todd's buyer broker is only 2%?
But at this point.
Todd can. Well, he could use that to help the buyer negotiate, but his brokerage cannot receive the 3%. They can only receive the 2%.
Because the seller's, like, I know that the broker's only paying me 2%, but if my BPH is 3%, I have every right to put in 4.3%.
Yeah, we're talking, actually, yeah, the scenario is my sellers, why is it the up to? And here comes the conundrum, you guys are, if you're following the Facebook and I am too, I'm trying to divide it, everybody's flushing out these best practices. Just because a seller gives you, it authorizes, does it direct you? It authorizes me to advertise and communicate with you up to 2.5. Well, what if your buyer broker is only 2%? You know you can only receive the 2, but that leaves that 0.5%. Did I kind of violate my fiduciary duties to my seller and cost them? Because as a sharp agent, you're going to be like, well, they offered me 2.5. I can only accept 2. I know there's another 0.5% out there. Now, some say you could. Here's what I look at. It's a seller's choice. The seller wants to save that money in the negotiations of the price, they're going to do it. So I really don't have an issue with that. It's there'll probably be a lawsuit over it. Maybe I'm wrong. But I do believe that the listing agreement, the spirit of it, and if I have the conversation with my clients is that, listen, you're authorizing me to offer up to 4% on that. If the buyer broker this buyer, we go under contract and I enter into a commission agreement with Todd in this case, and Todd's buyer broker is only 3, he shouldn't sign that document at 4 because just look, it's illegal and it's fraudulent. But he could say to me is, well, I appreciate the 4, but I can only receive 3. Okay, well, let's do that at 3. I could come back to my seller and say, we don't have to pay them 3. If you want to negotiate, then if Todd is like, okay, well, I'm going to use that other extra 1% and ask for some closing costs in the offer and stuff. As a listing agent, I'm going to catch it and just tell my sellers that, you told them 4, they can only take 3, expect they're probably going to want to negotiate. If you want to negotiate it, Mr. and Ms. Seller, we can. If you want to keep the money, then we'll be firm on our price. So I think in that way, I'm okay in my fiduciary duties. Here's what, I'll give you the verbiage that Dave Frederickson is talking about when we're communicating that. And it is basically, it's my seller is willing to offer up to 2% within the confines of the offer, basically pending on what the offer is. This is the hard part with this on the way the documents that we have, guys. It's tough. And I don't know if there's any right or wrong answer. Should we be offering? At the end of the day, here's the thing. All this would go away if they don't allow us to do cooperative compensation. Sure would make things a lot easier. And force everything to go in. The listing agreement has nothing with cooperative compensation. This is what I'm charging you to list a home, Miss Terry. It's my seller. You should probably expect, and I'm going to run my net sheet, that more than likely the buyer's agent's going to ask for a significant contribution to their fee, somewhere 2 to 3%. I think it's pretty average. Most sellers probably understand that. But can you guys see any downfall of having the only way that a buyer broker fee can be paid? That's not true, because a buyer can always pay it, but is you would have to ask the seller to do it, and it has to be in an offer, and it has to be negotiated. Is there a downside to that?
I stand on that. Kind of, in a way.
Yeah.
Well, look at one of our listers we put up, the sellers pushing back. I said, well, I think easier way forward is just to say we're offering a compensation and put into your offer, and we know it's going to be what my seller nets. Emily believes, she was saying, well, it's cleaner if you just do the buyer for compensation. But if you get into this mess with that. So my opinion is it's easier just to say, yeah, we're going to offer something, but it's going to be another net.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's negotiable. I think there's two schools of thought that are still, I'm probably still in the cooperative compensation broker to broker camp. And as a broker, it would be a lot easier to be in the other side of there's no brokerage compensation. There's no escrow agreements. It's just cut, dry, clean. However, there are, be prepared that you should have the conversation I'm going to have with my buyer is this: if I'm dealing with it, I write an offer, I do not use a compensation agreement. So there's nothing with the listing brokerage. Let's say I'm charging this buyer 2.5%. And I write that in the offer in section 4. I put in there that's 2.5% paid from the seller, and we ask for $10,000 in closing costs. And as Todd had mentioned, as listing agents, net this stuff out for your sellers. It's not really changing much, but everything's good. We go under contract. And the buyer does a home inspection. The roof it needs a new roof, furnace and AC. Buyer says, oh man, based on inspection, I'm good on closing costs. They're covering me there, but I want to ask the seller for 20 grand off, in lieu of repairs. So they instruct me, I write the addendum up and I send it over, and let's pick on Todd's the listing agent, and Todd's a good listing agent. He looks at that, talks with his seller, and the seller says, well, basically they want another 20 grand off. I'm willing to help the buyer. Why don't we do this? Well, let's just, we'll reduce the price 10 grand, and then let's counter back to reduce that agent's fee from 2.5 to 1.5. We'll send the counter offer back. I get the counter offer. I'm Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, here's what it is. Here's what you're responsible to pay me. I know we agreed that they were going to do it at 2.5, but we're in negotiations, and now they want it to be 1.5, and I don't really want to charge you more. So what do you want to do here? That's not a conversation I'm looking forward to having with a buyer, but I probably ought to prep them for that could happen.
All this.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
And I just go back to the listing agent and say, no. Fortunately, your seller did not maintain the maintenance that we needed to do. And either you're going to give us what we want, or we're going to walk away.
Yep. And you may be in those situations. So that's the point of this. What really I think in the Sitzer Burnett is, and the DOJ is the one that really is kind of behind all this with the pressure, is they want to what they're calling decoupling commissions. I don't know. I think cooperative compensation is probably dying a slow death. But it's here right now, right? So we still have that. I still am a firm believer of it. I like to explain. It all starts with me as a listing agent, explaining to my clients the pros and cons, that they don't have to. Commissions aren't set. So if you're sharp with the conversations with your seller And I have taken a few listings recently and all of my sellers are agreed. They want to be able to do it the way they've done it in the past and incentivize buyers to come and look at their house. Because they understand 90% of the buyers out there have an agent and have representation. I can explain that to my clients. I give them the choice. They don't have to do it. And then comes to me, how do I communicate that as agents? So what we talked about today, and this is, I see all the Facebook groups and stuff, and it's what about this, this, and this. Look at it this way, guys, what I want the agents to know. If, whether you're a listing agent or a buyer's agent, if you're, come back to Terry, if Terry makes me an offer of compensation and I want to take advantage of that on behalf of my buyer, I am going to probably go in and do the compensation agreement based, if Terry tells me 2, I'm not going to be a whatever and do 3 because she ain't going to sign it. She probably doesn't have author. Maybe she does. I don't know. But I'm comfortable with that. I'm going to get that agreement signed between Terry and I have some protection as Clint was talking about. That's kind of the old protection, that little BBC had a lot of weight, didn't it? If we go through that, then I'm having a conversation with Meyer. If there's additional, I know how to ask for it on behalf of my buyer, who I represent in the offer. I have the responsibility to make sure I'm not screwing it up. If my BBC is 3, I'm getting 2 here. I'm not putting 3 in the offer, right? I got to understand that. And I really don't want agents, it's pretty elementary. I put 1 in there.
If I have a buyer broker sign for 2%
Mhm.
and you're offering 3%, saying that I know I've signed it too, and I can put an additional in the rep C, so I.
No, no, no.
Okay.
Nope, nope, sorry. That's where sorry, some of this is getting a conundrum. So I want to come back again, just talking about, you have the broker to broker. If you don't have anything there as a buyer's agent, if the offer has been made, it behooves you as the buyer's agent to fill out that form, send it to the listing agent and get it signed before you submit the offer. If the listing agent's out of town or just like, yeah, put it in, then forget about it and then deal with your fee in the offer. And if you choose to do both, be very careful.
For example, if you have no idea if they were offering a compensation, so I
Mhm.
just put 3%. So now on the listing agents, is in their fiduciary fee, sending the broker to broker, and then the debit's cutting down to what that is.
Run that by me again, Todd. You have me.
I can't get the-
You're representing the buyer. Yep. Okay.
So I can't get hold of them, so I have no idea if they have
Mhm.
the broker. So the rep sheet, I just put my.
Just put whatever your broker, whatever, here's the line is, put whatever is on your buyer broker agreement or what your buyer directs you to do. Is let's pretend you have 4% in your buyer broker agreement. Buyer, yeah, hey Todd, I'm planning on covering 2% of it. Okay, then I'm putting 2% in the offer. Don't forget about our clients.
So
Right.
the listing agent, though, on the counter, they'd have to send you the broker instructions, and then they'd have to count it back.
They probably wouldn't. At that point, you're probably out of it with brokerage and the compensation broker to broker. They could, but it probably would get too messy. In that case, if I'm the listing agent and you're asking for 3, but my seller only wants to do 2, I'm just going to counter you 2. Then if you want more, you got to counter me back. And then we got to go back and forth.
How does that work? I'm asking the seller a direct payment.
Mhm.
The broker says the broker's offering.
That's if you get 2. If you get you make no word from the listing. And here's the thing with it, guys. Just go show the properties. Go show the properties. You can call, reach out to the agent, ask those questions on it. When in doubt, take your client out to show them the properties, because as good buyer's agents, you've already had the conversation with them when you sat down, you signed the buyer broker, and you talked about the ways that the fee can be paid either by them, from a cooperating broker, or from the seller. So you do your fiduciary duties. Go show the house, right? I really think we're going to be surprised to how easy it's going to be. In Todd's case, Todd can't get a hold of me as a listing agent, or I just don't want to answer it, or whatever. Or you get an agent that says, just send it in the offer. Okay, cool. Todd writes it, puts it in the rep C at 3%. Okay. I may have in my listing agreement authorization from my seller to offer 3% broker to broker. So as a listing agent, I'm just gonna get with my seller and say, this 3 that I have to offer out there, there's no agreement there, so you're fine to just pay it in the rep C. And Todd and I will not have a broker to broker. It's just going to be paid by the seller. See the confusion in this and stuff? It's just like, ugh. I think it's going to get better. I think they're going to see this. We're going through it. Everybody take a deep breath. Yeah, nobody's under any obligation to sign a broker to broker. Not. Yeah, no, exactly. That's where I want to keep this out. The broker to broker, this document here. Think of this as, this has nothing to do in the offer. This is between a listing broker and a buyer broker. Just like an escrow, it's an escrow. It's our new escrow instruction. It's our new escrow instruction. So if I'm dealing with, can I deal with commissions in 2 places, brokerage fees in 2 places as a buyer's agent with this form and in the offer? Yes, I can. As your principal broker, please be careful. Pause, usually nothing that urgent. Call me and say, Mike, I have it with Terry, the listing agent. We have a brokerage compensation. Both of us have signed it for 2%. My buyer broker is 3%. What do I do? If you and your buyer want to ask for that extra 1%, you would put it in section 4.3E. 1%, because if you read it, it's in addition to any other agreement, right? So you can see this, where all the talk is convoluted. I just want you guys to understand, think of it 2 ways. I'm either dealing with broker to broker, or I'm dealing with it with Todd and I as buyer to seller in the offer. And as listing agents, be very careful, okay? Just be very careful and just pause before you have people sign stuff. And you're, in this case, your seller's on it. It's just like, okay, I'm going to just go through a checklist. An offer comes in. Seller, I sit with my seller, or we're over the phone. We're looking at a net sheet on it. Do I have a broker to broker compensation agreement signed? No. Okay, then they've got it in the offer. If I have one signed with Todd at 2%, and then Todd obviously wants 3, I'm just explaining to my seller that the 2% is already over here, seller. That's on the net sheet. Now he's asking you for another 1%. Does it work for you? Yeah, okay, great. Then we're under contract. Todd's getting 2 from me, 1 from the seller, paid at closing. Could it be more complicated? Thank the class action attorneys. Okay, questions? Lori?
As far as negotiating as 3%, we have them sign that they're willing to pay a certain amount to the buyer, right? Buyer broker, right? To me, if we have them sign that, it's because they want us to advertise it. Let them know, look, we're paying this, we're gonna pay this. But what I'm seeing is, like, for example, I called on a listing yesterday instead of offering that. Said, yeah, just put it in the offer. He didn't tell me what it was. He said, put it in the offer. So, like, well, how is that to say yes, or is that more helpful than just saying yes, and it's this amount? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
It is,
you have to get information.
guys, here's what I'm going to say. This is going to be a really, really huge issue moving forward. And my answer to your question is, ask your seller how they want you to do it. I'm even considering, let's take a moment and read this, because this is probably the big crutch from listing agents. Section 2.2, authorization to offer. Company is authorized to advertise or otherwise communicate that the seller and the company is offering to pay compensation to a buyer's brokerage in the amount of, these little words, up to, change the whole dynamic, of the gross acquisition price. And then we have the standard disclaimer: brokerage fees are fully negotiable, not set by law or any board associate, blah, blah, blah. Here's talking with some other brokers on it, is that a clear direction? It's not a direction. So are we violating fiduciary duties by me saying, yeah, we're offering 2%, and what if your buyer broker is only 1%? Make our head spin. One thing you can do, and I'm working on this, is I do an addendum to every listing agreement. Right now I'm doing it because of what? The unrepresented buyer, okay? Where I do, my case, I charge, can you have a set fee of what you charge? Yeah, you can. Could we at KW South Valley, could I come out and say, guys, we charge 7% for our listings, and if you offer a cooperative compensation, it has to be 3%. Yeah. Technically, we can, the brokerage. There are some some brokerages do similar things? Yes, they do. We do not have that here. Okay. Within our brokerage, we're our own little family, right? So I have no problem talking about it. And this is where I'm just going to stop for 1 second. And I want to give you guys and people on Zoom, I apologize. I promise I'll learn the technology to see. And I think I can come to some questions there in a minute if there are. If you guys are on social media, I assume everybody's on social media. Okay. I'm looking at the choice of just getting off social media because of this. But if you are on social media, okay, we signed a code of ethics. Okay. I'm going to ask you, consider it a warning or whatever. Be nice, be polite, watch what you're saying when it talks about anything with compensation, brokerage fees, even inside of our private group, Salt Lake Board, et cetera, et cetera. You probably heard there was a lawsuit filed by Homey yesterday that's named Salt Lake Board, UAR, all the big brokerages and stuff for antitrust. Okay. And they feel that they have evidence, and I'm sure they probably do, from when Helmy started a few years ago with agents boycotting and agents disparaging. Now, I know that they put up some billboards that I felt were a violation of the code of ethics, but that's not for me to do that. Yeah. Okay. That's the thing with it, right? We talk about that. Here's all I'm asking you guys within this brokerage, and spread it to the other people here. Let's just keep our mouth shut about it. Okay. Even about their customer service, because I'm seeing the comments on it, guys. Let's rise above it. It's a non-starter for us. It doesn't affect us. We're going to go sell real estate. So it's just that stuff is getting watched, and the DOJ, everybody's watching the real estate industry. Let's just be the best. If somebody ticks us off, fine, great. I'm moving on. I'm going to go treat my clients with respect. I'm going to treat other agents with respect. There's plenty of agents in this valley that I've dealt with 30 years that I hope I never have to do a deal with again, but I would never tell you their names. I would never tell you their names. You can. I would definitely never tell you their name in even a private group. And I definitely wouldn't do it publicly, right? So let's just be careful. Those lawsuits are saying, oh, well, but they did, I tried to call. I understand. I agree. I was part of that. It was frustrating. And so we want to defend ourselves. Just be very careful with what you're posting on social media, because it's being looked at, it's being tracked, and all sorts of stuff. And we're better than that.
They taught us how to deal with this 5 years ago.
We were able to. There were certain companies that were offering, and the accusation is NAR's, guys, we have buyers that signed an agreement, and because that buyer was ultimately responsible for our commission, and we were good agents, and even back then we talked to them about it, that if they were going to look at this house, that it could cost them more money. That was my fiduciary duty, to talk with them about that and let them make the decision. And even if they move forward and there was only $1,000 BAC, I was going to go show that house. And thankfully that the Utah Association of Realtors had our back with the brokerage payment addendum, where I could then, on behalf of my buyer and at the request of my buyer, right? So yeah, we learned some stuff, right, already, to how to deal with this. So that being said, again, my soapbox on that was social media. On this with section 2.3, here's what is it? Best practices is your best practices on how to communicate a BAC, where to communicate a BAC, is whatever your seller wants to do. And you have the obligation to talk with them about that. I may go so far as for, because again, this authorizes me, but I also got to tell the sellers, hey, and I had this conversation. I said, you're giving me this up to. They're like, what is this up to? Well, let's say that we get an offer or compensation agreement and the buyer brokerage is only 2%. Well, would we save the 0.5%? Theoretically, you would. Yeah, theoretically you would, because that buyer cannot receive more. So if I'm offering 2.5 verbally, and then I enter agreement with Terry to pay it to her brokerage, but her BBA is her buyer broker is only 2%. Guess what? Your title companies are going to start asking for that, guys. And as a listing agent, now, can I demand it? Probably not. But if your brokerage accepts that 2.5, okay, if your brokerage accepts that 2.5 that gets paid at closing, but your buyer broker, and if this happens in this office, here's how I will deal with it. If you have a buyer broker signed at 2%, you get the agreement signed to pay 2.5. Cool, I'll figure out a way to do it. It gets through closing and we receive a check that is more than the buyer broker, I cannot pay you that money. I can't give it to the buyer, and I technically can't give it to the seller. Okay, there's a lot of legal. So what am I going to do with it? We're going to hold it. It's going to go probably sit for 6 years, then we'll release it and it goes to wherever you see the billboards is find your lost money. I cannot give it to you. It will be fraud and I will get sued directly, and you're going to get sued as an individual agent. You know, and when an individual agent gets sued, the brokerage is going to get sued vice versa. Okay. So we clear on that. Possibility it could, but are we altering an agreement that's already closed? Probably that would be the best case. In that case, I'd probably want everybody's, I'm going to tell you, you need to get a hold of listing agent or buyer's agent. You need to get everybody's signature on it and make sure that this money gets returned and you guys decide who it goes back to. I can't make that decision because there's too much liability with it. So here's what I'm going to say. It's not going to happen, right? So when your title company asks for a copy of your buyer broker at closing, do title companies ask for a copy of your listing agreement when you send a listing over? Your title companies don't? You guys don't send a copy of your listing agreement to your title company?
Wait, oh,
Your listing agreement. You don't send a, oh, wow. Probably sure your TC does, but your title company, I guess that's up to them, but that's the first thing I do. As soon as I get a listing agreement signed, I send it over to the title company because I want them to look, make sure that they've got it. They know what's getting charged, everything on it. I don't want the liability on that. They put the liability on them to do that. Be prepared that your title company, some may do it, some may not want to. But if your title company has your broker, if they ask for a copy of that, your title company, you're representing a buyer, you're directing, or your buyer's directing the title, send them the agreement, show it. There's nothing to gain from not showing it to them. Because if they get the contract and your BBA, your buyer broker agreement has 2% and it's coming through at 3%, even if it comes through, I can't, do you guys understand? Don't call me and say, Mike, how do I do this? Because they're an addendum that I can do. I cannot do it because I won't commit fraud, and it's fraud. Okay. So that brings me to the fact that we sign a buyer broker for 2% and we negotiate. Seller's called Terry and Terry's willing to pay 3. Can I get that money? Give me your consensus. Lisa?
Sorry, I was thinking that's
My buyer broker is signed for 2%. And I'm looking at a listing and Terry says, yeah, we're offering up to 3%. We'd love it. In fact, we'll pay you, seller even pay you 3.5% if you bring in a full price offer. Can I accept that money? No. Can I do an addendum to my buyer broker? All right, so can I do an addendum as a buyer's agent? I mean, Todd's my buyer. They had it signed at 2, looked at a few properties, and we end up in Terry's listings paying 3. Can I just, Todd, we'll forget about that document and let's just sign it when at 3%.
is your documents, your TC will put them in pen.
Hmm.
So that
What if I didn't turn it into my TC? I haven't turned it into anybody. I don't know. You guys tell me.
That day it's expired. So I can sign for a new buyer broker agreement for another duration, and I can, in my opinion, I can add a higher PA. My original one at 2%, that's now dead. And because the way they're forcing me to do this now,
And that is, that's one I can't argue with that. You can't argue with that. If it becomes common practice, it will get messy. I'm just going to say this with it. Have the conversation of your value up front with your buyer. I want it just to be policy for the brokerage, if you want to call it. What you start out your original buyer broker with is what it should be time. We can't do the addendums because here's the thing with it real quick. If I sign one with Todd at 2%, let's say we did it for 4 months, so it's still active. I never turned it into the broker. Division of Real Estate has a statute in there, is any agreement signed between an agent, and in this case, a buyer, agreement has to be held in depository at the brokerage. Any agreement, anything that's signed in writing has to be held. So even though he didn't turn it in, needs to be there. Fraudulent if that is not turned in and then it is canceled, except for the situation where Todd was talking about, if it was only one. I'm just going to tell you guys, be real careful with it, because who's they? DOJ. They're looking, attorneys, class action attorneys, looking to see how we manipulate the system. So have your value conversation with your buyers about what you charge and can you take less? Yes, you can. Hopefully you don't. Some people are doing that. Some people are just saying I should do 5. Guys, have the conversation with your buyer. Have the conversation with your buyer. The other thing that people are asking me is, Mike, if I sign one at 3%, that's what it is. There's no open-ended. Can I do an addendum that says in the event that I'm unable to negotiate my commission? No, cannot do an addendum. It's whatever's on that document there. Hang on one second, Todd. No, you can't do that. So I can't tell my buyer, but if I told my buyer, said, Shelley, you're my buyer on it. Shelley, I'm willing to work with you on it. We'll cross that bridge if we get to it, but we don't even have a property identified. And let's see how it goes. We've worked together before, Shelley. Trust me? Cool. Okay. So I go out, it's 3%. I can only get 2 or 2.5 on that. I don't need to do anything. I can accept less. Probably not a bad idea to do an addendum when it goes to closing and just verify that it's down at 2.5, but you don't, again, how many people have had a buyer broker signed at 3% and you just closed the deal and the BAC was 2.5? You didn't do anything else. One point I want to make on that is this, and it just totally slipped my mind. Give me 1 second. My brain still works. Okay, no, it's gone. It'll come back. Todd?
So, along with that, so let's say, I think Emma's actually talked to you about this, so we have a client who have.
Yes. You're going rigs up. Thank you. You're awesome, dude.
So am I allowed on my addendum?
Yes. Once you get to that point on that particular property, yes, because you cannot, guys, can you go higher? No. Can I manipulate to go higher? No. Can you go down? Yeah. That's only that particular property. So I'll set that up. Buyer broker signed 3% with Shelley. We go out, we look at a property and it's only offering 2%, 2.5%. I'm cool with that. It hasn't closed yet, but Shelley kind of wants to, I want to have something in writing telling her that I'm not going to, come after her for that extra 0.5%. I can do an addendum to that and say, buyer brokerage commission in section 2 of the buyer broker with this particular property, shall be that. That's your reduce. So you wouldn't want to do a blanket. Does that make sense? So that should be pretty elementary, but thanks for bringing that up. What it led me to too is a question. I think it was Emily I was talking. Todd and I have a buyer broker signed at 3%. We're fine with it. We understand that's the thing. And we talk with Todd about, I tell Todd, listen, if we make an offer, we've negotiated, we're there on it. The best I'm able to negotiate is 2% on it. You're my good buddy. We've dealt with before. I'm not going to charge you anymore. Todd's like, cool. What about your broker? People are going to ask me. Do I have the right as your principal broker? It's my buyer, technically. Could I? It could. Guys, it is your client. I will defer to you on it. If you come to me and say, I want to enforce this, I will enforce it. If you don't, I'm not enforcing it. I don't have to. It's at your discretion. So you can be comfortable telling your clients that I'm not this big mean broker up there saying they only got it was 3%, Todd, and then Mike closed it at 2%. I want that extra 1%. I'm not going to do that. I've never ever asked any of my principal brokers to ever do that. Are there scenarios where I will have your back to do our best to try to collect? Yes. Can you get blood from a stone? So, but you can be comfortable telling your clients that And will I put something in writing on that? I don't want to alter something on it. Just sometimes in this case, send me a text that says, would you collect on it? I'll text you back and say no. If really push comes to shove on it, but here's the problem I have. I'm probably in violation of that agreement by saying up front, I won't enforce it. I don't know. Above my pay grade when I'm not an attorney, so, okay. Would you please? Yeah, because you, yeah.
For the lawsuit, so it's different, but he is an attorney, and he said, I'm not going to pay you, so you are, only gonna get paid what they offer. So, because I had originally done a 3%, he honestly said he would sign with me unless I changed it to a 0. Is there
Yeah.
something that I could hire a broker to leave it at 3 and then an addendum, so he knows I'm not gonna force it, he said, I can't, you could enforce it. So I just got an April plan.
Could you have done it back then? When you had a protection on it? Yeah. Can you do it now? No. Has to be a definitive amount. If you put 0 in there, you're working for free. You cannot receive more. What's more than 0? Just about everything, right? So, well, guys, you're going to have these clients that come in, I hate to say it, first-time home buyers that just physically don't have it. Now, do I think that's going to be the case? And, can we put, everybody wants to be able for me to come up with some addendum verbiage that states, I want to be able to charge X, but if my client can't afford it, they want to know from the get-go. Well, I do it. The only thing I can come up with in consulting with other brokerage that is not in violation of it would be just do an addendum that says, and this is probably what I'll do in that case, and it'll just depend on that particular buyer, how much I like them. The buyer and a buyer's agent have the right to cancel this agreement at any time. You're going to have buyers that can't afford to pay you. Yeah. 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 And that's the negotiation piece that this settlement has gone into. And we've all had that before. And frankly, guys, I was guilty of it years ago. I was like, effectively, you're not paying me anything directly. You're buying the house, so I'm getting paid, but nothing's coming out of your pocket to pay me, because we've always had this system and it worked pretty good, and we just don't have it anymore. So our conversations are going to change with our buyers. So all these different scenarios. Let's ask the mortgage lender. It's going to be a lender question. I wish I could give you an answer on that. Possibly. If the sellers pay $30,000, my guess is the mortgage lender will want it broken out on an addendum, and I don't think there's any problem with that, because can a seller pay the brokerage fee? Yeah. My guess is the mortgage lender is, if I just make an offer, I don't put anything in section 4.3, but I just ask for the seller to pay $30,000 towards the buyer's closing cost on it to be paid. That's a real good question. I don't know. I'm going to have to defer to the mortgage lender on that. And we could possibly see some verbiage. It really is the mortgage lenders. Our closing cost addendum now is seller agrees to pay up to $10,000 towards buyer's loan closing costs, prepaids, homeowners insurance, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they put in their brokerage fees at some point. Right, yeah. So a lot of them some are 3% maximum, some are 6%. I think you're going to get lenders more liberal with that, but tell Emily that's a good question. At this point, I would really want clarification from my mortgage lender. If I just do this blanket step, but man, I wouldn't want to rely on it. Rather than ask the seller for 30,000, buyer needs 15 and I want 15, I'm going to probably put it in, again, assuming there's no broker to broker compensation. It is concession, right? And I think sellers probably, I don't care what they use it for. They pay the agent's not asking me to pay them anything. They're just asking for this lump sum towards there. And so for me as an agent, if I'm a buyer's agent, I just want to make sure, number one, mortgage lender, help me figure this out. Am I allowed to do this? Can we direct that money? Can the buyer authorize part of their closing cost to pay the commission? It's just going to depend on the lender. Sarah, was there anybody on Zoom that, okay. Okay, no problem. Yeah, let's just do, just continue your Q&A, guys.
Well, I just, I passed it on. Somebody was like, we are offering, you know, compensation, whatever that might be. Let's say it's 2.5%. And the agent still asked for that extra 0.5%.
Mhm.
And normally said nobody would have asked for it, but now they're asking, like, how do I handle that? I'm like, well, you let yourself decide if they're gonna pay it or not, you know? But I think to me, it's caused us to go like, at least for me, like, I'm gonna fight for that extra 0.5% that I never fought for before.
Yeah. And you have the right to do that, right, guys? And what does this all boil down to is please, please, please have the conversations, involve. We're talking internally, not out on a public source about the abilities. Nobody wants to work for free. I don't want you working for free. Unfortunately, I think mistakes are going to happen and agents are going to be put in a position where I can't back you up and I can't get you paid. And you're probably going to close the deal and work for free. I just want to prevent that. But we need to have the conversations with our buyers and sellers really on how they want to handle this. So for me, my whole dynamic is much more detailed, like what Todd talked about. And your situation with that is I can't afford to pay you. Then I'm going to take a look at it and say, do I want to run the risk that they fall in love with the property and the seller or the listing brokerage is giving me nothing? Now, I'm willing to work with them. I want to help them out. I'd love to get what I normally charge, my standard of 3%. And I'd work with them on it, but then you just have to decide for yourself, is it worth the risk? Now, that being said, I think it's probably going to be rare that you're not going to be able, because price does everything. You get to sell it, it says, listen, I want 500 grand. I'm not budging. I'm not paying any buyer's closing costs. I'm not paying any realtor fees on it. If your buyer wants that property, could they offer 515 to get you paid? What if it doesn't appraise? Just a risk. So just be careful who you choose to work with. And you're probably going to have to I have some kind of almost like requirements of things. First one is people got to be fun to work with. I kind of got to like them, you know?
That's on me to make sure that I guarantee myself.
Yeah.
That
It,
I'm gonna run that comp to know that it's gonna come out.
there you go. Yeah. You guys do your due diligence. It's up to us. You're the professionals. Have those conversations with your buyers. You don't have to work with everyone. There are situations where it's just going to be a little more difficult, but I think you'll be able to flush something out. And people have asked, well, what if my buyer can't pay? Could they? There's options. It's done before. I'm not super familiar with it, but we could figure it out where a buyer pays $500 a month for 6 months to make up. Yeah, we got different options. Just remember, if you don't get as much as you were entitled to when you close and you work out an agreement for the buyer to do it, you can't have them send you the money. It has to come through the brokerage.
They can have, they can have you the
They can have them send me the money, not me personal. They can send it to me personally. Through the brokerage, right? Who's the only one that can pay you? Principal broker, brokerage, KW South Valley. Yeah. So Todd makes a great point. We've really got to have those conversations. It's different conversations. It's the same document. It's a more in-depth conversation. We owe that to our clients. If you guys do that, I think you're going to be, I think we're all going to be pleasantly surprised at how we are able to help our buyers keep money in their pocket by asking the listing brokerage or now the seller directly to pay an acceptable fee for us. Okay. And listing agents, just be nice to each other. Don't expect it. If you call somebody and say, well, are you offering cooperative compensation? Yeah, put it in the offer. Don't get mad at them. Put it in the offer. Or if they say, well, how much is your buyer broker? Buyer, do you care if I disclose the amount to him on it? Sure, 2.5. Okay. Probably jot down. Got permission from my buyer that I could relay that over. Honestly, I don't even know if you need permission, but probably check with your buyer first. And I called Terry back. I appreciate you asking, Terry. I got no problem. Actually, this is a friend of mine. I'm doing it for 2%. How much you offering, Terry? Terry says, 2 works. I got 2. If I need more, or if my buyer broker is more, if I'm 3, I call Terry. Terry, you offering any cooperative? Throw out a scenario. Terry, you offering any cooperative compensation on this, or particularly how much? Okay. Okay. So probably not. Should I send you over a compensation agreement, Terry, based on my buyer broker? All right, so takes me 2 minutes, boom, 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 put it at 2.5, zip it over to
Cool.
Terry. Like to show the house tonight.
Yes.
Terry. It's up to Terry to sign. I'm off and running.
Shelf.
If Terry doesn't
Yep.
sign, I'm gonna go show. And then basically tell me, we gotta have a lot of those different scenarios. All I'm gonna say, be nice. Be nice. So,
There's so many other cool houses out there, so you're allowed to tell your buyer, like, if you're not paying, you don't feel
That one.
comfortable. Like, that's not steering, that's them saying it's.
And that's the master bath. Yeah,
is that,
you got that? You got it?
can you handle so? I gotta work on technology. Yeah, market's gonna, you know,
Want them in the house?
I think I pointed this out on Tuesday whenever I was talking about it, but
I put
every-
it in the
I'm glad this didn't go into effect
master.
in 2021.
Oh,
Because it would
money
be,
clothes.
you know, we have inventory, buyers have choices. If you get anything out of today, be careful with where you're asking for the brokerage and if it's in two places with your buyers and with your sellers, right? Cool. So we're good.
Sarah,
Okay.
you muted Mike.
17th. If you still have any hanging out there, get them done, get them in the file because it's going to be part to be able to get paid. All right. So, yeah, and I think I know. Okay. I'm going to answer Todd's question, then Daylise has one. If your seller or buyer refuses to sign it, I can't force them to. Come see me on a case by case when you get into command and get it signed off. We'll talk about
Put
it.
it in the laundry room, just on the side.
Sign it, so. Daylise, you have a question?
You do both.
Yes, we were talking about frauds come up a few times. And so my question is, you know, say like my side, I seem to be doing, you know, I don't have any questions. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I'm the seller agent, I'm representing the seller. And in conversation, it comes up that I'm offering
That one?
not me, but my seller is offering 2.5%. That's what I'm authorized to offer to the buyer side. And it comes up in conversation that the buyer agent did have a 2% buyer broker, but they're just going to do an addendum with their buyer and bump it up to 2.5%. From everything I understand, that's considered
Hey,
fraud.
JD and Natalie got here.
But I know that information. What are my responsibilities? Did that make sense? Did you hear that? I can't see you now.
If the buyer only has that agreement at 2 and they modify it, hate to say it, that's on them. That's fraud on their part. I don't know who you report it to. You could call their broker. You could call me and I'll talk with them. But chances are you're probably not going to see a copy of that buyer broker. So
Yeah, no, I'm not. I didn't see it. It just comes up in conversation with the other agent. Maybe I know the other agent fairly well, and we're just chit chatting, and it comes up in conversation. I just want to know what my ethical obligation is. Like, because
ethical
we're all figuring
obligation
it
would
out.
depend if that came up. And it really all depends on when you sign. If you're going to be signing the brokerage compensation agreement and you're that other agent and I'm I tell you that we're offering 2.5 and you then tell me that, well, my buyer broker is only for 2, but I'm just going to do an addendum on it. And I haven't signed anything yet. I'm probably not going to I'm not going to sign anything that is at 2.5. I might
Okay.
ask you as the other agent, you know what? I want to be on the up and up on this. If you're telling me verbally, I don't want my seller and I as a listing broker don't want to be on the hook for it. You have the right to do whatever you want, but at this point might be a good idea to see if you'd send me a copy of your buyer broker so we can verify it. And if they tell you no, and they send it over and you do the 2.5, You know, it's verbal. You haven't seen it. I'd probably tell you sign the 2.5, and if they get caught, they get caught. But before that, I'd probably go back to my seller and discuss with them and just say, so I'm thinking through this scenario. So you got me talking on my feet. I'd probably on that one, I would just say, you know what, if you told me it was 2, I don't want to send anything at 2.5. Why don't you just put it in the offer? I'm not going to enter into a compensation agreement with you.
Okay. And
Probably
I really all figuring this out. I mean, so I think people are going to make mistakes and be very unintentionally doing things that maybe they shouldn't.
yes.
So I'm not looking to, rat anybody out. I'm just trying to make sure that at least on my end, that I'm in compliance to what your expectation is. Because
Yeah,
I
and
think there's going to be a lot
everybody
of
is-
mistakes as we figure it out.
Yeah, we is. And that's why we talked about that. Okay, brokerage compensation agreement getting paid. Do I put it in the offer? Can I do both? Yes, all of the above. You can do it all. But when you're representing a buyer, you're representing a seller, I really want all my agent, myself included, to have a good understanding, look out for it. And you know what, guys? Treat the other agents with respect. If you think it's unintentional, and what you just had mentioned, that's what the Facebook groups were talking about. If Terry and I have a we have a compensation agreement signed for 2%, and then I send Terry over the offer and I have 2% in there. If I'm Terry, I'm probably calling Mike. We have the 2%. I thought that's what you said your buyer broker was, but then you put it in section 4. Did you really mean to do that before I present this to my seller? Oh, no, I thought it was the same. No, it's not. Do you want to revise your offer, or I'll just take it into consideration and I'll counter you? Get it? You guys understand that? Is that the ethical thing to do? Yeah.
But they tell me they're buyer broker, but
Yeah. So guys, that's part of it is cooperative would be easier. There was no cooperative compensation, but yeah. You guys feel like you have a decent understanding of it? Keep going through it. I'm still, and then things change a little bit. Maybe do this, maybe do that. Just when in doubt, just take a break and call me or call somebody else that just say, hey, I know you were in that class too. I just want to make sure I didn't get the brokerage compensation signed and I really want to submit the offer. What should I do? Put your commission in the offer because you have nothing. Verbal? Well, I wouldn't want to be getting an attorney to try to collect on that.
Alice, it's not- I know that stuff, yeah, plus it's form now, so you just submit it.
Mhm.
Should be something.
Yes.
Another question she said is that she was under the impression that you wanted to sign the ERSs now? Or you wanted to sign something?
No, maybe, and I think that conversation with guys, if you start getting complicated with addendums on listing agreements and buyer broker agreements shouldn't be, but if you start getting complicated on those things, I'd like to see them. I don't necessarily have to sign them. Especially with these changes. And again, a lot of this issue on the listing side of it, and how about this and this and this and all that, hopefully that's going to change sooner rather than later. And all these conversations we had about unrepresented buyer and to do this and going up and then going down is just a moot point. It's okay. It's a learning curve. I do want to mention at this point too, because there is still, do you guys understand that if you take a listing, you sign a listing agreement, Lori and I signed a listing agreement yesterday. But I'm not going to have it on Lisa. Sorry, Lisa. I knew that.
I know.
Lisa and I have an agreement signed, but I'm not getting photography. We signed it yesterday. I'm not getting photography till the day after Labor Day. What do I need to do? Yes, I can do that. Can I do that? Yes. If I don't do that, if I don't have I never get, the last thing I have a seller sign is the input form. Well, here's the thing with it. The long-standing rule, and the reason why it came about, and it's actually not a bad thing. There was a time, and I'm dating myself, when you could sign a listing agreement with Lisa. Does it say anything in that contract about when a house has to be started to market or be put on a multiple listing service? No. Lisa could be thinking, hey, I signed a listing agreement. I'm excited, man. Showings are going to start. And then I took off and went on vacation for a month and then come back and said, okay, the client demands service. So the MLS came up with this. It says you have 5 days to do it. Okay, maybe it should have been 30, whatever, but it really, yeah, can't force in your MLS. Okay, MLSs are going to get beat up pretty bad over the next couple of years. That's why that came about. It's actually good because if I listed my house with you, I expected it to communicate with me, but agents weren't. And we had this new MLS years ago. And so that's why they came about. So we still have that. Okay, that if you list it as part of a Salt Lake Board of Realtors and members of the UtahRealEstate.com, we have to abide by their rules, which, okay, nothing we can do about it until that changes. So if you're not going to be on the market in 5 days, you can either do active no-show, but for me, I don't have the listing input form filled out. I probably don't even have the price. It's just the way I operate. It's a process for me. So I'm not doing that because I'm not putting it on there with incomplete information. What's my other option? What do I have to do? So I avoid a $250 fine that you will get. Okay, MLS exclusion form. Can anybody show me where the form is? No, I don't want the online. I want the PDF form that we've been signing for years. It's gone. Okay. It's gone. And if anybody's on Zoom, my very first broker moment talked about this, but there's still a lot of people are not understand. They go in and they say, okay, I don't have to, and you had to send that to the MLS, right? I used to do it through Dot Loop and they sent that real long reply back that thank you, we got it. And it was within 5 days. Now, look at this. Okay, so I got to do that. I haven't done anything else. Nobody signed anything, but cool. This is nice and easy. I put my address in, my effective date. I go in and I always chose this version until it's ready to be publicly marketed. And then I just went in and submit. I'm great. MLS, I'm not going to get that $250 fine. Oh.
So what Emily does now is on the actual ERS, she just has them sign and know under the signatures. These are not submitted to the MLS until.
Yeah.
That satisfies.
So all we have on here to be in compliance is I certify I've received prior written permission from the property seller to delay or withhold on it. We don't have that nice form. If you still have a copy of a PDF, send me a copy because I probably need. Okay, can you still sign that? Yeah, I got no problem. Could you have your seller sign it where Todd said? Just write it. Be careful writing stuff on an official document. I do it on an addendum because right now I'm doing the unrepresented buyer on all my listings. I do an addendum to it with the verbiage, seller authorizes listing broker to not blah, blah, blah. It's right here. Seller authorizes listing broker to not submit the property to the MLS until it is publicly marketed or something like that. Oh, yes, I'll resend that. Look, I can tell you real quick, if you look at it, the email that went out last week has all of them on there.
So I said, mine says, if buyer is represented, buyer agent, listing fee in section 2.1 shall be 3%, as long as the buyer is represented by a buyer's agent with a signed buyer.
You guys want to get a little bonus here from coming to class today? At this point, right now, I have no problem if you charge, Terry, you sell my house, how much you charging me?
Yeah.
10%. You're going to give me authorization or I'll give you authorization to offer 5% out. So in our listing agreement, I'm going to expect that you're going to put in section 2.1, you're going to put 5%, right? And then in 2.2, you're going to put 5% out from there. Okay. So that means that what are you going to charge if you get an unrepresented buyer, Terry? 7? I'll pay you 7. Yeah, I'll pay you 7. But Terry has 5 in section 2.1, right? And I tell Terry, I'll pay you 7. So we talked about that scenario and then we come up with that addendum and we talked about this low to high. For right now, until we get the change, I don't have a problem if you do the addendum to your listing. You say, in the event that seller accepts an offer from an unrepresented buyer, the commission in section 2.1 shall be raised from 5 to 7%. Just do it. I don't care. Do it right now. Don't hold me to it. I think it's going to be short-lived, but can we modify? Is my seller understand it? Is it easier for me to explain as than this? If you want to do it the other way and you still got that verbiage, that's fine. I really think within a couple weeks, hopefully, we're going to have a listing agreement that makes this a moot point. So if you want to make it easier on yourself, I don't have a problem with it, as long as you explained it to your seller. If you explain it to your seller and they sign that. So if you do that addendum, just add this verbiage here, guys. Okay. And I know it's happening a lot and I know it's kind of stupid, but I see them about every couple weeks. So if I sign my listing agreement with Lisa, we signed it on July 1st. We're finally ready to hit the market on September 2nd. And I go to do my listing input and it asks me for the effective date of the listing. What do I put? The date of listing agreement. Date of the listing agreement. What about DOM? DOM. No, they don't. The DOM starts on the day you did. You have to put the effective date of the listing agreement. That's the date it started. Don't worry about DOM. Yes. Can I tell on myself? So I listed a fourplex last week. It just went on the market, I think, yesterday, but I listed it actually before the weekend before I went out of town. And I had a note on my thing about the putting in the online exclusion. I had it signed by my seller, signed, you know, the verbiage in there, don't submit to the MLS. And something bugged me yesterday. I'm like, I can't remember if I did that. And it's been more than 5 days. So I actually called the MLS. I'm telling on myself. The problem is they don't send you a receipt. They're working on it. Remember, they used to, if you submitted the PDF form, they sent you a receipt back. Now they don't when you do that form. And I couldn't remember. And I called them and the lady said, listen, if you had, you know, show us that you had written permission on it and make sure that you go fill the form out now, even though it's been like 10 days. So I did that and I'll probably be okay. But if you're not submitting that form within 5 days and you don't communicate with the MLS or be like, oh my God, I forgot. I promise I have it in writing. I'll send a copy of it to you. When you go list it on September 2nd and you put the effective date of July, at some point it's going to trigger, did we get an MLS exclusion form? No, and then you're automatically going to get an email that fines you $250. The first time they'll allow you to take a class, probably. Second time, no, it's a good fine. So enough about that. Just get it done. Make sure you got it in writing. She looked and didn't have any record of it, so probably yes. But I'm like, there's no, I mean, come on. It's like, yeah, it was my bet. But let's communicate with them. Make sure you got that written permission. So now what I can do, if I didn't have written permission on my addendum, gonna be a little tougher. They might, you know, I'd ran it a few years ago. They cut me a break because I just plumb forgot on it. But I just do on every listing agreement, I do an addendum to it and I add that verbiage because I'm never, unless they're ready to be on in 5 days. If I'm ready, I could do the active no-show and you don't have to do any paperwork. It's up to you. Did somebody else have a question? Fourplex, 702 Le Bon, Provo, 86099. Yeah, it's a good duplex. Good owners on it. They've only owned it for like 7 months, but it is. It's live. Yeah, just went yesterday. Yeah, fourplex. Yeah, pretty standard brick fourplex. It's a good one. It's a good one. They're just moving. They're buying a bunch of new townhomes. So yeah, take a look at it. You guys cool with everything? What else is going on? Talk to me. Give me some success. And anybody can leave. You're welcome to. You don't need to. I just like to come. I'm learning as much from you guys and trying to keep up with this.
Sure, the scenario I said before, I'm gonna be like telling your buyers, if they're not gonna buy it, here's other homes that we can see if you're more comfortable with that, if that's considered scenario.
No, here's the thing with it, guys. And we talked about this, and I don't have specific verbiage, but I could put something in an addendum, right? I know I said don't do addendum. Don't do addendums that change that BAC. But Todd and I are talking, and Todd's tight on money. And he's a great guy, and I want to help him out, and we're probably going to be able to get paid on it. But I asked Todd, I'm happy to call on these properties and find out where we're at. We may run into a property where they just tell me that they're adamant about not paying any brokerage fee on it, which would make it fall on you. Do you want me to show you those properties? Say no. Okay. I'm gonna just put that in writing. And just so we have that, covers me, covers you. I don't want to be accused of steering. Okay, I don't operate that way. If you change your mind, it's fine. I'll still just go show you the property, but I may do a buyer broker that says the buyer reserves the right to choose which property. I don't know, I'm shooting off the cuff. I don't know what the verbiage is. I might think about it, but again, it's just put it in writing, right? You know, run it by me and we'll talk about it. But is buyer instructs agent to not show properties that may or may not offer brokerage compensation. If you're making the decision to show a property based on the amount of commission that you get paid is steering. We talked about, we had lawsuits on that years ago, and that's the biggest fear that they were doing on it. And now it's even so less transparent for a buyer on it. Have the conversation with your buyer, explain it to them. And I would have that conversation with Todd. You know, most buyers I'm gonna explain if they're like, well, we'd really like to not pay you, but we value your work and hopefully you can get as much of this commission. Sounds like you're gonna work with us, Mike. Great, let's go start looking at houses. In Todd's case, I want to have that. And Todd say, you know, you couldn't. Todd's like, man, I would love to. Maybe I could do a payment plan, but probably not. But you know, I don't. I have enough. I got the down payment. If the seller doesn't pay my closing cost, I can't buy the house. There's no way I can pay you. There's a lot of houses out there, isn't there, Todd? You know, so I can do on your request, if you'd like me to research these properties a little bit more, because to avoid you falling in love with something that you can't quote unquote afford, I'm happy to do that. I'd like to just have it in writing so I'm not accused of steering, and I've just write some verbiage and have them sign it.
But if someone pushes back about trying to pay us, I'm not sure if I want to work with that person. Because at that point, they don't see the value of what the agent does. They just look at us as their broker.
Amen.
If that's the case, then go find a builder.
Amen. And they will, and will be, excuse me, some people are, you know, I'll do 1,500. You're going to see a lot of here's what I'm going to tell you. Other questions I'm getting is, can I do menu of services and stuff and all that kind of stuff? Just run it by me and just be really careful. Just be really careful, you know, because it's like, well, I could charge, because I think technically you could probably put 3% on your buyer broker, and technically you might be able to do an addendum that is, or less. You could do 2%, and then you could do an addendum that it's 3% if buyer wants me to do a complete CMA on every house that they look at, et cetera. I'm like, guys, don't go down that. Just have the conversation with them. They can either, if they can't pay you, do you want to work with them? You may love them. It was during COVID. I hate to say it, first time home buyers, friends that just, they barely had down payment, friends that were VA buyers. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. There might be some agents that can, but I can't write 30 offers for you and the chance that you're probably not going to get a house. I'm sorry. I just had to value my time at that point. Can you do that as an agent? Can you be selective of who you work with? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, VA did modify that. I think you could get it, and that's a really good question, and it's one I got to dive into more. But from a broker's perspective, is what if we just did an offer that didn't have anything in 4.3, assuming there's no cooperative compensation between the broker, and I keep, because Terry was my example. Thanks for being a great listing agent for me today, Terry. Is you just ask seller to pay $30,000 towards buyer's loan and closing costs, whether that's on a VA loan or not. Again, I assume the lender is probably going to want it separated out. Could you just do an addendum that says seller to pay 15,000 towards buyer's yeah, I can put it on an addendum. It's in the REPC now, it's all fair game. Anything can be modified with an addendum. Probably still better off to put it in section, because that money goes from the seller to the buyer brokerage, has nothing to do with the buyer, but there could be this lump. That leads me to believe, I haven't even looked at it. Where have you guys seen, is there a concessions field on the MLS? You know, absolutely.
Is that,
So put the bond, like, so you put like Emily charges now $295. So she puts that in the first plate with like where the dollar sign is, she says
and then
$295.
plus.
Yeah. It has it has dollar amount and they specifically did that. So yes, you can still do that. I just haven't, I've been meaning to look at it this week, and I just wanted to pull. You know what I'm talking, the concessions field? Yeah, there's nothing at the bottom. I guess they have it. Yeah, in all this hubbub, I've just kind of forgotten about it.
talked about that, but I'm sure
They're probably still working on it, so. I don't know.
So, question for another scenario.
Okay.
So for example, Emily lost out on a buyer because a lender/agent basically said, hey, I'll give back 2% of my commission to you. That's much harder to do now because it's so much more.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think so. That's a good situation. I would think because he's a lender, he could probably defer it there. But in that case, let's say he wasn't a lender. Theoretically, you could sign a 3% buyer broker and do an addendum that says buyer's agent will credit $2,000 towards buyer's closing cost. What do you guys think? Just a buyer broker in this case. Emily had lost out to another, because yeah. Yeah, I'd be careful putting that on I'd be careful putting that on an addendum if you chose to do that. But so my guess is Todd, he probably did a straightforward, just pay, here's the number on the buyer broker, and then on the lending side of it, whatever their disclosures are, could show else.
Lender and
That's a good question. And I was looking at that, trying to look that up on the division, because I didn't think it was allowed. And I don't think it's still to be doing both, but there is something in there. And I read something on the division that led me to believe that there possibly could. Well, I certainly wouldn't want the liability of it. So if any of you guys are lenders, my policy is no, you can't do both. Yeah, I'd probably run that up the flagpole with the division a few times to just make sure. Yeah, and I think you still see that one is registered as a lender, one is this, and I think that's, they're separate. I think you're probably okay, and that might be where I'm thinking with it. But as an agent, as a buyer, I would be pretty leery of my agent and the lender. I don't know, maybe if it was a good buddy of mine, I'd be fine with it. But so back to Todd's thing on there, more than likely that was probably coming from. I wouldn't want you at, because if you sign a buyer broker at 3% and then you write on there that buyer's agent will pay $3,000 towards buyer's closing cost on that, there's no escrow agreement that could really handle that. It would probably have to be done in an addendum, and you need to have the lender. The lender doesn't see a copy of the buyer broker. Where's the commission coming from? Is it being paid by that? So I think those effective deals. Yeah, we'll sign on that. I can see the compensation. Terry is a good seller. We have 3% compensation agreement signed. And then I decide to, like we've done for how many years, we're at an impasse, seller's not giving anymore. I decided I'd like to gift $5,000 towards the buyers for closing costs. I'll send over a modified brokerage compensation, because it gives that other down there, because that's our new escrow instruction, that you're paying 3%, up to 3%. And then down there, I'm going to put that buyer and seller agree that, and subject to buyer's lender approval, that the buyer brokerage fee of 3% less 5,000 will be paid, or 5% will be credited. It's going to, we'll figure out the verbiage on it. Same way as the escrow instructions, just not as clean, in my opinion, on the verbiage. So lots of things happening. Are things good? Conversations? Have you guys had conversations with the buyers?
It might be like, once people get all of these things down, right? So we had the whole month of August, now we also ready to go. I wonder if some people might need a little help with, they're so good at, and this is what I remember from 3 years ago when you.
Thank you.
So good with scripts. And not
Yeah.
necessarily scripts, because I hate that word, because like,
That's just knowing what to say.
yes.
I like to just call it it's confidence, confidence in knowing what you're talking about.
Benefit from your.
I know people would benefit from it if they show up.
Well, that's the thing what I'm doing, guys. Yeah, this is the smallest one. I think we're kind of through everybody take. I'm going to continue. Keep this on the schedule. I'm keeping this on Fridays. I just do it 11 to 12:30. I'm happy to stay as late and answer. I love these powwows because it gets me FaceTime. So encourage people to come. And we can move forward because at some point we're going to get sick of talking about how do we do the commission. But there might be somebody new that comes to and I got to take them in and explain it to them. And that's okay. I'm just going to be redundant. And
Yeah.
me too.
That's what
Yeah, I think I finally, it's just, be careful with the commissions. Just slow down. Slow down. Well, thanks. It just comes with experience and all this is new to me and but I will always I'm taking my conversations much deeper with my sellers, much deeper with any buyers now. And I'm a worst case scenario guy, seller. Worst case scenario, if you're offering me you're giving me authorization and I might even put it in writing on my listing agreement that seller directs Mike to listing broker to offer and communicate the full compensation amount, not just up to. If you want to do that, guys, have that conversation.
like that,
Good.
dress not. Know what I mean?
There are some things to do, and that's where I want you guys to bring that back. What are your clients talking with? If I got a seller that I don't think really understands it, I might want to clarify a few things, and it might just be simple. It's just like, I may find that, that they really don't want me to offer out that buyer broker. And then in that case, what am I going to do? I'm put 0 in 2.3. And then when Terry calls me, what am I able to say? Are you offering compensation? No. What if Terry asks me, is your seller considerate? Better be real careful what I say. So in that case, if my seller doesn't stand, I'm going to say, I recommend, if you don't want me communicating, I'm putting 0 in 2.3. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, more than likely agents are going to ask, well, will your seller consider paying buyer broker? And so, well, it depends on the offer. Cool. Are you okay with me communicating that? Then I'm just going to put that in the addendum that in the event that I'm asked if there is compensation, seller authorizes me to say that the seller would consider paying buyer broker compensation within the confines of the offer. It just depends. It just depends. If it's something that I feel we should document and permissions from the seller, for the most part, I haven't run into it yet. Because I'll explain it over and over. And we all know that we can explain it a gazillion times. We think they understand it. And when push comes to shove, they're like, well, I didn't understand it that way. When I get those, when in doubt, you guys are free to. It's just, we'll probably come up with almost an addendum to the listing agreement checklist. Seller authorizes this. Seller doesn't authorize this. Seller doesn't do this. Seller doesn't do this. I don't want to do it until we see the new form. Probably not too worried about it. But don't be afraid to do that. People ask me, what should I do? What does your client want you to do? What's in your client's best interest when you really shift it? I'm always happy to answer those questions, so don't stop calling. But look at it, your fiduciary duties are to your seller. Explain it to them. Seller, do you understand this? Well, I don't understand this up to. Well, here's how it could work. I could say 2.5, and if their buyer broker is only at 2, you could look at it like we're leaving 0.5% on the table. How do you want me to handle that? Mike, I don't care. They bring me a good offer, I'll pay them more. All right, then you're okay with me communicating up to 2.5 and just plan it's going to be 2.5. Yep, cool. Not doing anything more. I'm telling everybody, shouting it from the rooftops. I'll do a compensation agreement with you, or you can put it in the offer, one or the other. Just don't do both. Yep. Cool.
My seller was offering the compensation. I had like 10. So we really can't see it until after the open house. No, they keep texting. They just keep texting me about it. It's in the MLS description. It's blocked out on the line. They keep texting me about it.
You probably got a property that's in high demand, so you're probably going to get it sold. Yeah, so that's the thing is, be patient with it. They keep texting, they keep great. I'm glad they're interested in this property. Yeah, just be patient with it. And again, I think with agents where you're asking or you're getting asked about BAC and how much and show me a copy of your buyer broker. Well, no, you show me a copy of your listing agreement. Just, I think I know which, yeah, no, send it to me anyway. I think we're out of here.